Good day, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Military and Foreign Affairs Network. I am your host, the voice of reason. So today we are continuing our ongoing coverage of the war between the Russian Federation and Ukraine. At the same time, as I continue to cover this conflict, I believe we are getting a very sobering assessment of the future of war. The future of war, if you are a citizen of the United States, will eventually be a city near you. I believe gone are the days in which the United States entered into conflicts, and those conflicts had no weight or bearing on the U.S. population. That is rapidly changing as we watch this conflict. This conflict is changing the face of war. Technology is changing the face of war. It's not so much this conflict between Russia and Ukraine, but technology. And at the same time, the actions of humans. Whether we like it or not, the United States is driving Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, and other nation states together in a very cohesive alliance with one ultimate goal: to bring down what they perceive as United States hegemony. It doesn't matter what we believe here in the United States. You can tout the narrative that other nation states do not like the United States because we are quote-unquote free. That is nonsense. It is much deeper than that. And if you believe that, you are stupid. I had the opportunity to watch Mike Pence, presidential candidate, former vice president, state that if the United States does not prevent a Russian takeover of Ukraine, then U.S. forces will be fighting Russians someplace else. And he mentioned Latvia, he mentioned Estonia, he mentioned Lithuania, he mentioned Poland. Well, look, it was the U.S. choice to bring Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania into the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Was it a wise decision? I've talked about this before. Probably not. It's an untenable position in terms of global strategy. Are you closer to Russia? Do you now have military bases closer to Russia? Yes, you do. But can you defend these bases, these bastions of NATO, Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania? We don't know the answer to that. Probably not. But as we watch this war take place, as we watch what is happening in areas such as the Orikhiv pocket, just south of Orikhiv, in the town of Robotynya, we are seeing that the ability to conduct offensive operations by both sides, Russians, Ukrainians, because of technology, it is becoming incredibly difficult. The ability of both sides to quickly identify the movements of opposing forces is what is happening on the ground. If Russian forces maneuver battalion, brigade, tactical groups, the United States sees what is happening. If the Ukrainian military attempts to maneuver combat brigades towards Russian lines, the Russians see what is happening. And then you have an immediate counterstrike through long-range, multiple launch rocket systems. Here are the ATACMS. These are not yet being used. They will be used, in all probability, in a very short period of time. And the Russians have similar systems too, such as the Iskander, which is actively being used in this conflict. Not to mention air power, attack helicopters, what have you. So the ability to see your enemy moving and then instantly, within minutes, to conduct very precise calls of fire mission against those forces is changing the face of war. If you are a Ukrainian combat brigade and you are trying to move towards Verbova in this direction, let's say you are elements of the 82nd Air Assault Brigade and you are attempting a move towards Verbova, the Russians see those forces moving. Then the Russians very quickly conduct call for fire missions against those forces, thus killing them or causing major damage to those forces. And we're seeing it time and time again. That's why it is very difficult for Ukrainian forces to move in this environment. Now, what I envision this conflict, what we're seeing right now, as more or less the early stages of a much broader conflict that could break out. Much like we saw in the early stages of World War II, the Spanish Civil War. New technologies were tested. Tanks, Stuka dive bombers. These systems were tested in the early stages of the war, of the conflict in Spain. We saw a war of ideologies, left versus right, take place in Spain. Poland, same issue. The initial stages and the deployment of the German Lightning War, Blitzkrieg. Now, within the context of this war, we are seeing what happens when you have the ability to see everything on the battlefield. So as we proceed forward towards global world war, and it is going to happen again, we as humans are an inherently aggressive species, and we will fight another global war. The probability right now appears to be one in which Western nation states, the United States and certain U.S. allies, engage in a world war against China and the Russian Federation. Because the United States has pushed Russia towards China with its involvement in Ukraine. That cannot be undone. The damage that has occurred because of U.S. involvement in Ukraine has led to what is going to be a greater conflict in which you have the Chinese and the Russians, the Iranians, the North Koreans fighting the U.S. and its allies. It's probably going to happen. Now, what is that war going to look like? Again, with Ukraine being the early stages of seeing this technology, the use of satellites, the use of long-range guided weapon systems, that is going to morph into something different than it even looks now. What is the future going to look like? Is it this? If you live near a major city at night, is this what you are going to see? Now, obviously, these are Israeli Iron Dome systems engaging rockets coming from Lebanon. But yes, cities in the United States eventually will be targeted by long-range, stealthy weapon systems. They may not be nuclear. They may be long-range ballistic missiles with dozens of smaller re-entry drones or warheads that will target places in the United States. So what could some of those targets be? Well, I'll show you. Why would China launch attacks against a city in the United States? But let's look at east of Denver. I think this is very important for anyone to understand the why and what could eventually happen. This is Buckley Space Force installation. It's Air Force Base. It's not the planes that the Chinese or the Russians would be targeting. It is these. These white bubbles that you see. These are used to track and communicate with U.S. satellites. These would be targeted in a future conflict. Not by nuclear systems, but by conventional systems. Could the Russians launch cruise missiles from the Gulf of Mexico and fly the distance towards that base? Possibly. Could the Chinese do it? Possibly. But the ability to eliminate your adversary's ability to sense targets on the ground will be of paramount importance in the future of war. The ability to destroy the opposing force's ability to see you in real time will be something that militaries will have to undertake and accomplish. Because again, what we're seeing right now in Ukraine is just that. If these forces have the ability, either Russian forces, Ukrainian forces, U.S. forces, helping the Ukrainians, are sensing the movement of ground forces, then they will destroy those ground forces. It's going to happen. It simply cannot happen. It is the evolution of war. Even the ability for maneuver units to maneuver in the future is going to change. Here's a system. Look at this. It is a ground launch longbow Hellfire system. These rockets are normally or missiles are normally launched from helicopters. And what they're doing now is they're putting them on multiple launch systems on the ground, and a special forces soldier or a drone operating along the line of contact has the ability to spot the movement of enemy forces, and they can call very precise attacks by these weapon systems. And the next stage will be artificial intelligence, where you will simply launch these missile systems in the direction of where you believe an enemy is. These missiles will either loiter or go to the last known location where an enemy armored vehicle was or is, and engage those systems. And there's just this one rocket system. You count them up: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 10, 15 Hellfire missiles in this one system. This one system could destroy a company-sized element of armored vehicles. 15 armored personnel carriers or main battle tanks could be destroyed within seconds by this system. And all you would need is a satellite system or some sort of drone system that sees those ground targets, and then from 8, 9, 10 miles away, this missile system engages those targets. So again, war is changing. So how do you prevent that from happening? Well, you have to destroy the enemy's ability to communicate with those satellites, with those drones, through the destruction of space assets. So now we're into space warfare. China, Russia will be targeting U.S. GPS systems. They will be targeting U.S. assets in space. The U.S. will be targeting Chinese space-based systems. But it's just not going to be the systems in space that both sides are going to be targeting, because those systems are going to have to be repaired. Each country, Russia, China, the United States, will then send up new GPS systems, new spy satellites that have been destroyed. And thus, the actual launch platforms located inside respective states will be engaged by long-range missile systems. War is coming to you, America. It's going to happen. It has to happen. There is no other option other than if we were to do a full nuclear engagement against each other. Then obviously that would set back war quite literally hundreds of years in the past, eventually. But again, this is what it's going to look like. Long-range air defense systems. Long-range anti-tank, anti-vehicle systems. Extremely long-range multiple launch rocket systems. And then obviously space. So I wanted to discuss that. I wanted to talk about that because it is on the way. It is just, in all probability, a decade away, meaning a direct engagement between the United States, China, and Russia. This conflict, again, what's happening in Ukraine right now, is going to push these nation states towards total war. Both sides are not willing to lose inside of Ukraine. The Russians can't lose. The Russians see this as something that they must win. And right now, the United States sees it that way as well. Especially the regime that is in current power. Now, that could change. And in all probability, it will change. But the damage has been done. Russia and China are allies, and they're allied with one common purpose. And that common purpose is the United States is their enemy. So we will continue to report. There's just not a lot of changes that have occurred on the battlefield in Ukraine over the last 24 hours. Again, as we have talked about before, as the Ukrainians try to move in this pocket, they are essentially being engaged and destroyed. Very difficult for them to expand this pocket. We have seen other engagements along the line of contact, but again, no actual large-scale maneuvers are taking place in the sense that they're taking territory. The Russians are hammering Ukrainian forces, and in some cases, the Ukrainians are hammering Russian forces as well. But it is not a war of maneuver currently. It is the war of the ability to sense and shoot. Identify targets on the ground, and then rapidly bring overwhelming fire to bear on those targets. The day of the maneuvering tank battalion is rapidly going away unless there is a shift in which those tank battalions, those mechanized battalions, have active defensive capability, meaning they can shoot down missiles. And they don't have that capability currently. And right now, the side that has the ability to see the other side quicker and bring more firepower to bear in terms of long-range artillery and air power is going to win the conflict. So as always, thank you for joining us. If you'd like to support the channel, super thanks. You can always go to the About section and support the channel through Patreon. I appreciate the support. More to come very, very soon. Thank you for joining us. Have a good day.